Welcome into the Buck Sexton Show, NYC edition, because I got stuck here because they canceled a few thousand flights. So here I am in the Big Apple. But fortunately, my buddy Alex Berenson is around to shed some light on things. You all know him from his phenomenal Substack. His book, Pandemia and Unreported Truths, is the COVID Substack. He's still fighting the good fight to get us some truth on what the heck happened during COVID. We know it was a complete disaster in terms of the response. Mr. Berenson, always an honor, sir. Good to see you again.
Good to see you. I was wondering why you had the New York City background.
I know. I'm usually a Miami guy these days, but I don't know what's going on. Airlines getting worse. I'm not just going to say it's Biden's fault, but maybe it's Biden's fault. Airlines seem to be getting worse all the time. Tell me this, though. So this is something, I saw this. You share this on your Substack, which I'm a subscriber to. Clay's a subscriber to. So, we're fans. And you're talking about something that's really important to people, or should be really important to everybody. Some people, I think, try to block this stuff out now. And it is, well, were there really serious fatal heart issues based on real studies from real places that people need to know about when it comes to the COVID vaccine? What can you tell us?
Sure. So this sort of comes under the broad heading of died suddenly, which, that's been a controversial topic. And there was a movie that came out a few months ago, which actually was, to my mind, a real problem because it was so easy to dismiss. But so died suddenly is, people who were vaccinated and then had cardiac events afterwards, right? Or cardiovascular, and to take an example that nobody would disagree with, there's a small number of really young and middle-aged women who had terrible bleeds in their brain following the Johnson & Johnson or AstraZeneca vaccine. It was just a tiny handful of women, but these were fatal most of the time, and they were terrible. So the issue with the mRNA vaccines is we know they can cause myocarditis in some people. That's, heart inflammation. But the CDC and these groups have all, the public health bureaucrats and the media, they all say, oh, it's very rare when that happens and it's very mild. And, and yes, there are going to be some people who die after being vaccinated, but that would just happen randomly. That just, because so many people got vaccinated, you have to expect that some people will die. Even if they're young and healthy, just because we're giving 1 billion vaccines to people, we're going to give 1 billion people this new vaccine, some of them are going to die. It turns out that's not true. It turns out that there's a real pattern that if you autopsy people who've died shortly after being vaccinated of sudden cardiac events, you can see the inflammation in their hearts in a specific way, and in the cases where this is vaccine caused, and doctors in 3 different countries, in Japan, in South Korea, and in Qatar, and I would say all 3 of those countries are advanced countries, including Qatar. I mean, Qatar is a wealthy nation. They did medical record reviews or autopsies, and they found a significant number of deaths that, in young men, especially after being vaccinated, these sudden cardiac deaths could be causally linked to the vaccine. So I want to be clear. We're not talking about, 10 people get vaccinated and 1 dies a sudden cardiac death. If that had happened, it would be obvious. We're talking about maybe if there's 50,000 vaccination series given to people, 1 young man might die. Okay. So maybe that doesn't sound like a lot to people, but when you vaccinate 100 million people under the age of 40, that's a couple of thousand deaths globally. And the other thing you have to understand about this is there's no benefit to vaccinating those people. If you're a healthy young man, you're at very, very low risk from COVID. Putting aside all the other bad things that can happen if you're vaccinated with these mRNAs and stuff that we're only 2 years into this. We don't even know truly what the long-term effects are. And putting aside the fact that these vaccines don't do anything to stop COVID long-term, this all by itself suggests that there's a measurable risk that somebody's going to drop dead of myocarditis that leads to a heart attack or a cardiac death. And unless you do the work, unless you autopsy them, you're never going to know it. And so to me, it's disgusting that the public health authorities won't acknowledge this and that they didn't do the work. That instead of doing the work, they said people like me were just making it up. Well, it's not me. It's doctors in Japan and South Korea and Qatar who did very good work on this.
Why isn't the U.S. doing anything at this phase of the game? I mean, I could guess, but I just want to know. I mean, how could it be for all the people out there, for the Dr. Hotezes, sitting in the back now? They were sitting in the front, but now they're kind of all shuffling around. What possible rationale could there be for other countries doing more serious studies of the COVID vaccine side effects than what we see here?
I mean, obviously, we just don't want to. I mean, whether or not the public health authorities are going to admit it, the COVID vaccines are dead. Okay, Walgreens is obviously a huge drugstore chain. Their earnings fell short of estimates. Their stock went way down yesterday, Tuesday, and one reason was they said COVID vaccines fell even further than we predicted they would year over year. They fell more than 80%. So I think everybody in the public health establishment, whether they know it or not, whether they admit it or not, is fully aware that nobody under 50 is ever going to get these shots again. That most older people aren't even going to get them. There's going to be very few of these administered, and they're just going to pretend this never happened, just like they pretended the lockdowns didn't happen, and they pretended school closures weren't their fault, and they pretended, we didn't spend billions and billions of dollars on useless test and trace and try to get you to download digital apps on your phone. Remember all this stuff, Buck?
Yes.
This happened. And it's all been memory hold, and everything that happened with the vaccines is going the same way. It's totally obvious. And so to research these side effects, they just don't want to. I think they're just hoping that there's no long-term damage. The problem for them is that if you look at England in particular, which has really good death data that they report weekly, is still way, way above normal in terms of all-cause mortality. And nobody has been able to explain that either. So when I say way, way above normal, again, I'm not talking about, they're, double the number of people have died. What I mean is 10 or 15% above normal, which during COVID time, that's about what it was. And we shut down the world. Now we're running at the same death rates, and the public health authorities just won't even talk about it. So, I mean, I do feel, I know you still talk about this. When Tucker was on, which obviously he's not on Fox anymore, but he was talking about it. Hopefully when he gets back on Twitter, he'll talk about it. But I feel like we're trying to swim upstream here against a media that just wants to pretend that nothing in the last 3 years happened.
So I want to offer you a theory as to why that's happening, and it's a tremendous frustration for me. I mean, you were out there, and you deserve all credit on this one, on the forefront, shouting to everybody, this is crazy, particularly on the vax. I mean, I thought masks were insane from the beginning, and they were, and lockdowns were absolutely nuts from the beginning, and they were. The vaccines, I was willing to be like, all right, I mean, they think these things work. You were saying, hold on, look at the data. I want to get back in a second, Alex, to why I think that's going on and what's happening kind of at a mass psychology level. But first, word from our sponsor. These days have the longest daylight hours of the year, so you can get done a lot when it comes to your day-to-day and especially outdoor activity, but you have to have the energy for it. For some of us, that can come naturally, but for a lot of us, especially as we get older, we need the help of Chalk's Male Vitality Stack. This awesome nutritional supplement, the leading ingredient in which has been proven to effectively replenish testosterone levels, is available to you now via Chalk. Look, testosterone is crucial. It provides energy, focus, drive, stamina. Chalk understands this. Higher testosterone is something that can really help. Some studies show the average guy's testosterone is 50% down from what it was 50 years ago. It's diminished a lot. Now, people say there's a lot going on there. Diet, stress, environmental factors, sure. But the leading ingredient in Chalk's Male Vitality Stack replenishes 20% of an individual's testosterone in just 3 months' time. Sign up with Chalk. It's spelled CHOQ.com. Save 35% off when you use my name, Buck, in your purchase process. That's 35% off for the life of your subscription, not just one time. Chalk, CHOQ.com. Use Buck as the promo code for 35% off. All right, Alex, on COVID, I think this is what's happened. They used brute force to make everybody do things, including people who knew that it was crazy, but that created a complicity that now everybody just wants to forget, right? Like I think of a lot of parents out there who probably thought to themselves, my kid being masked up on the plane and in school and all this stuff is absurd. But they did it because they were made to do it. And so I think now there's just everyone wants to forget because a lot of us had to do crazy things whether we wanted to or not.
Yeah, I mean, I fear you're right. We're all good Germans now, right? We all want to forget what we did. And for those few of us who, and I would put you in this category, who really from the beginning stood out and said some of the, I forgot masks, by the way, when I said all the crazy stuff, right? The masking was crazy too, but we all went along with it, and yeah, you're right. We all want to forget it. And so I feel like sometimes, and look, still have a tremendous following on Substack, and you can go and see how many comments the average article gets. But my readers are very focused on this, but I can feel that we are sort of a small group, that we are trying to resist the memory holding and say we need to fix the historical record. But when 30% of the country actively liked it and 50 or 60%, as you say, went along with it despite their concerns, that doesn't leave that many people.
Yeah, it's amazing to see how, to me, if you're like Gretchen Whitmer in Michigan and she got pretty resoundingly reelected, I just want to say, what the hell is that? I mean, this woman was insane. Was like this,
Yep.
Hellish soccer mom tyrant. It was like Stalin decided to run the state of Michigan for a while, and Michiganders went along with it. I mean, one area that I wonder if they're really going to track this down or not, because normally they would. You've probably seen, Alex, $200 billion of COVID relief they think was effectively stolen through fraud.
Yep.
Are they going to track all that down, or a lot of those fraudsters, is it going to be part of the memory holding? That
seems to be the one thing that they will discuss, is how there's some if you were some guy in Houston or whatever who had who bought 18 cars, those are the one people we're allowed to say, the one type of person who's the victor, the villain of COVID. I will say it's interesting so the U.S. doesn't talk about vaccine side effects. There is work being done in other countries, and the Europeans actually, who are a little bit more resistant to advanced biotechnology than the U.S. and certainly don't like to pay for it. They are fighting right now with Pfizer and Moderna about the fact that Pfizer and Moderna want to deliver hundreds of millions of more doses of vaccines that the Europeans don't want, and so basically they're going to get stuck in a freezer until they're expired. And Pfizer and Moderna are basically, or I should say, I'm not as sure about Moderna, but Pfizer has basically said, you don't want the vaccines? Fine. You just have to pay us half of what we would have gotten for them anyway. And so that has caused a little bit of anger in Europe. But you would think, Buck, there are investigative reporters out there who would be interested, forget about how well the vaccines worked or didn't. The fact that literally probably about 2 billion doses, as best as I can figure, were manufactured and paid for and never used at a cost of something like $40 billion. I mean, I know we have a big government that wastes a lot of money, and it wasn't all in the U.S. anyway, but $40 billion is still a lot of money. Yet because it's related to, the holy vaccine, no investigative reporter in the world except me will touch it. It's really phenomenal, the unwillingness to ask just the most basic questions.
I wanted to get your take on RFK Jr., Alex. I haven't had a chance to ask you about this and where he is on this. We'll get to that here in just a second. But the Tunnel to Towers Foundation delivers on its promise to do good and never forget the sacrifices America's greatest heroes have made for us. Heroes like Marine Corps Corporal Seth Rasmussen. Seth was one of 5 Marines killed in a training accident when his Osprey aircraft crashed in California. He was just 21 years old. Seth is survived by his wife and high school sweetheart Avery and their infant son. Tunnel to Towers reached out to Avery within days of Seth's death to tell her she would receive a mortgage-free home. Avery didn't have to worry about where she and her son were going to live or how she would pay for it because of the financial security and support provided by Tunnel to Towers. Tunnel to Towers has helped over 1,000 military and first responder families navigate the worst of times by removing the burden of a mortgage payment. Support our nation's heroes and their families. Donate $11 a month to Tunnel to Towers at T2T.org. That's T2T.org. Alex, RFK Jr., I get this all the time. People say, Buck, you agree with him on COVID? And I say, yes. But I say, I don't know about all the other stuff, though, that's going on. When he's talking about, he went on Rogan. I know you've been on Rogan talking about the vaccines. My YouTube channel has been going far too long without a strike. So why don't you tell me, Alex, what do we need to know here about RFK Jr.? Is he getting it right? Is he going too far? When he talks about vaccines specifically.
I mean, I think I basically agree with you. I hate to agree because I know it's boring television or podcast, and maybe that's why we should get a strike. But look, he's right to raise serious questions about the mRNAs. I have not investigated the childhood vaccines. I never have. My sense from people I trust is that they work. And my kids have all been vaccinated with the standard stuff, not the mRNAs. They've all gotten the standard vaccine schedules. I don't have any regrets about that. And they'll continue to go on the standard schedule. So that's where I personally stand on that.
Well, I think that's really important, by that people know this stuff. Like, you know what I mean? That the way that people act, like I know that climate change lunacy is crap because they're all frauds, right? They don't actually live their lives the way they want everyone else to. If you've gotten your own kids vaccinated and feel good about it, people need to know that.
Yes. And here's what I would say broadly, about RFK Jr. He is raising good questions about the fact that, the childhood and adult vaccine schedule has just exploded in the last 25 years. And there's clearly the fact that these companies can get liability protection for anything that gets labeled as a vaccine is driving that. The fact that this used to be sort of a tiny little corner of the pharmaceutical world, and now it's bigger and bigger business, with the mRNA COVID vaccines being the biggest pharmaceutical product ever over the last, 24 months, although now that's gone away. I think he's right. He's right that we need to look critically at what we're doing with these products that we call vaccines that have very, very little in common with old school, the old school polio vaccine or the old, these simple inactivated virus vaccines that have been around for a long time. So I agree with that. And I also agree with his broad critique that the medical system, especially in the United States, is not working very well for people. That, that they're all the money we spend, our results are terrible. And, I don't even know if it's fixable, but I understand the frustration that he's channeling. But that said, the specific stuff that he gets on with, whether it's about, Wi-Fi, I don't even understand what the Wi-Fi critique is, to be honest with you. I mean, it seems bizarre to me. And, some of the complaints he has about specific childhood vaccines, there does not seem to be great scientific grounding for a lot of that stuff. So I'm glad. Look, I'm glad that he's speaking. I'm glad that somebody who's passionate is raising questions about where healthcare is in the United States. But a lot of the stuff that he says specifically is problematic.
I want to ask you about, so you have a background, I'm back from your days at the New York Times in looking at like FDA and approval of different drugs and foods and things. I want to ask you about synthetic meat, Berenson. We're going to get you just a little bit outside the vaccine comfort zone here in just a second. But first up, backed by popular demand, the team at MyPillow has brought their massive closeout sale to you with the My Slippers, which are their top-selling product so many months. It's phenomenal. I've got a pair at home. My wife has a pair. Every member of my family has a pair. The My Slippers are super comfortable. They've got an exclusive 4-layer design you won't find in any other slipper. Patented design makes these slippers both durable and comfortable. When you wear them, you won't feel any stress in your feet, just pure comfort. Go to MyPillow.com, click on the radio listener special square to grab a pair of the all-season slippers for $25, regularly priced at $149.98. Enter my name, Buck, as the promo code for that $25 price. Go to MyPillow.com, click on the radio listener square, get a pair of the all-season slippers for $25 when you use promo code BUCK. All right, Alex, I see that the FDA has just approved lab-grown meat. Does that, on a culinary level, I will speak with some confidence here that it is not going to taste like real meat and will be gross because all fake meats taste like fake meat. But is it getting a little weird with the Frankenstein meats and the other, the all the stuff they're putting in our food? This kind of ties into some of the JFK Jr. stuff.
You know what? Do I have to have an opinion on everything?
Yes. Fake meat. You cannot escape fake meat.
I'm not eating it, all right? I mean, this seems like a solution looking for a problem, right? I mean, I guess you want to say, like, you wanted the taste of meat without having to kill animals, and I guess.
Well, it's a climate change thing. They're also doing this with the pizza ovens now in New York. They want to get rid of coal-fired pizza because they say there's too much CO2 emission from making most delicious New York pizza pie.
Yeah, I think people, look, this is the bigger issue, right? The bigger issue is there's a serious move in New York State, I think in other blue states, to sort of remove, what I would call sort of normal heating sources from residential and commercial buildings, right? We're going to try to build with no oil or propane, or we're going to try to build with non-carbon emitting heating sources. And in the Northeast and in the Midwest, that just seems absolutely insane and impossible to me. I don't know whether they're actually going to try to force this through, but I know in some communities, some in near, not too far from where I live, there's a town that's pushing in this direction. So, and I think you said it best when you said these people they want to get on private jets and do whatever they want. Okay. They want to emit as much carbon, as a million African villagers do when they fly to Tahiti. Okay. So don't lecture me about how I have to change my life when you are basically going to exempt yourself from all of it. And I do think that the hypocrisy is very destructive, and I don't think any of it's going to work. I think if the Democrats actually push this, there'll be tremendous pushback to them.
Alex Berenson, everybody, go check out Alex's Substack. Unreported Truths. Am I still right on that one?
You are. There are still truths that that are being unreported, and hopefully one day we'll get to talk. I don't know what about the Yankees or the Mets or something, and we will not have to talk about COVID and lies about the vaccines.
Yes, we can. Well, you'll have to teach me about these things because I do not watch the baseball, sir.
That's right.
Clay is the base. Actually, I'm going to tell you something. I'm calling him out right now. I make jokes about this on the radio show. With Clay, you can bring up, a second string SEC player from 1975, and he'll tell you, what that player's like parents' first names were. But baseball, he gets a little shaky. I'm just going to tell you, baseball, he's like, oh yeah, that pitcher, he's great. I'm like, I see what you're doing there. So you're much more, I think, on the baseball side of things than both of us. You are suing the federal government, aren't you? Isn't that underway still?
Yes, we didn't talk. Next time we'll talk Berenson v. Biden, Missouri v. Biden, social media censorship. This is an issue that really does matter because it matters for all these other things, right? It matters for how we debate climate change or Ukraine or anything else. And RFK Jr. getting censored by YouTube over and over again. So I do think this is this is worthy of its own segment.
All right. Well, we'll have you back, sir. We'll have you on the radio show, the podcast. We'll have you in all these places. Go check out Alex's Substack, which is fantastic. Unreported Truths. Mr. Berenson, thank you for your work, sir. Thanks for joining.
See you soon.